Hi, hello, I'm Sam Harrison. I read, review and discuss fantasy and science fiction books, and today we are reviewing The Blade Itself by Joe Abercrombie. This is the first book in the First Law universe. It's Abercrombie's debut book. This review is going to be non-spoiler, so while I might talk a little bit about characters who are in the book, about some of the setup, I won't be going into, how it ends. I don't want to ruin the experience of reading this book for you because it is an excellent book. This is my first book that I have started and finished in 2025, and a real banger, I have to be honest with you guys. I actually wasn't planning on reading this, so I have owned the First Law trilogy in paperback for quite a while, and I've owned the Kindle copies for even longer. I bought all three books in the First Law trilogy on Kindle in 2011, not long after they came out on Kindle. I mean, when did this actually be published? This came out 2007, so yeah. I've had this. I bought it not long after it came out, and I bought the entire trilogy. I think once the final book had come out, the first two were on. Anyway, so I've had this for a very long time, and I have read the first chapter of this book 3 or 4 times, being like, I'm going to get back into reading, but then I never read any more. And I got given a set of these. This is actually my spare copy, so I bought this copy for myself a long time ago, a couple of years ago maybe, when I first started getting back into reading by reading Sanderson's Cosmere books. And I was like, do you know what, I want to read something a bit different to Sanderson. I will try out this First Law that people were raving about. I'd seen a lot of booktubers really talking about how much they loved it, like Mike from Mike's Book Reviews. And I was like, I'll read this when I'm done with the Cosmere. So I bought this copy secondhand from somewhere, which is why it's got a damaged cover. So it's got these 2 bits of damage on there. And then I was gifted a set, the trilogy, and that was great. So this one went into my donate pile. And then when I was really sick, I couldn't get to my books. They were all packed away. And I just wanted to read something physical, but I could get to my donate pile, so I was able to get this one out, and I started reading it. And I was really surprised by how quickly I was taken with this story. So while I have a couple of small complaints and niggles about the book, overall, I really, really loved it. And I think that I think I will decide while we discuss this together during this review whether I'm going to give it a 4 or a 5 out of 5. But I can tell you safely that this is an excellent book that I highly recommend. So let's get straight on into talking about characters. So there's 3 main points of view in this book. There's a few other ancillary points of view that pop up a few times, but primarily we're looking at Sandan Glokta, who is kind of like a torturer / detective. So he basically used to be the golden shining sun of the Union, which is like the big, like the main kingdom in the First Law world. And he was like the golden sun. He'd won the fencing competition that they call the contest, which is like the biggest thing in their society, like part of their culture. He was this decorated soldier. He went away to war, and then in saving his entire company, he is tortured. He's captured and tortured for 2 years. Half of his teeth are knocked out. His leg is basically chopped to bits and rendered useless. And he's just tortured for years. And he is rescued and comes back to society. But he comes back as this outcast. He is struggling to even walk. He uses a cane. He can't, struggles with things like steps, standing up. So we get a lot of we get a lot of really interesting storytelling from Glockter, and a lot of it is like he's kind of trying to work out what's going on with this like conspiracy of like the new rich, of these merchants in the First Law Society. He's then also investigating some other stuff that happens later in the book, and through him we kind of see the different strata of the society. So we see everything down from the base criminals all the way up to the ruling classes. And then we also have Giselle, who's, it's pronounced like Giselle in the audiobook, and then spelled Jezal in the physical book. I ended up going with like Jezal. It reads more right to me, if that makes sense. So Jezal is basically on the same train that Glockter was. He's training to fight in this contest to become, the new #1 Golden Son in the Union. But he kind of doesn't care. So he's training for it because he feels he has to, because his father has like put him up to it. He's from a rich family, and you kind of have, through him, you get to see this kind of view of like more of the upper classes, and really interesting, talking about like how he changes through the book. So he starts off as this kind of pompous ass, and he ends the book as also a pompous ass, but he's kind of seen some shit, and he feels a bit more real. He feels a bit more grounded. I really enjoyed his character arc. I think he ended up being one of my favourite characters in the book. And then the final character we come to is Logan Ninefingers, who is a barbarian from the north, from a different country outside of the Union, who used to be the champion of the King of the North. And they would have like, as a champion, he would basically be sent out to fight villages, and like the villages would send their champion, and when Logan beat them, the king would take over the village, and only one person needed to die or be defeated. And we find Logan in the frozen north, running from these kind of they're called Shankar, and they're described as flatheads. It's really interesting that at the beginning of the book, you're like, oh, Shankar must just be the name of another tribe from up here. But then as you go through the book, you realise slowly, like, oh, these things that they're talking about, they aren't human. They're like, the enemy beyond the wall in Game of Thrones, like they aren't zombies, but they're like, kind of non-human, like ogre, orc style. Like they're the bad dudes, and you get to kind of look at, you get to kind of see this threat, and then throughout the book, more threats and big goings on are revealed, and we get also through Logan's story, we get to meet Baez, the first of the Magi, and lots of really interesting stuff happening through Logan's story. I think Logan is almost the closest to the like big overarching story. So one of my big problems with the first like 70% of this book, 60%, is that it didn't feel like to me like there was a threat. Like I felt I really enjoyed all of the stories, and I was reading it going like, this could almost have been a short story collection, because you follow these characters, and I was like, these characters are quite separate. They are kind of doing their own thing. And I was like, we could have this one, why is this book could almost be like, these are 3 short stories from characters in this world. Eventually, the stories weave together, and eventually we also get a glimpse at the threat that is what we need, which is giving us that direction, is pushing us forward. But it does take a while to get there. So if you're the kind of person who, when I talked about this in my first weekly wrap-up, one of the things that I talked about was how in the original book Game of Thrones, right, the prologue that it starts with introduces you to the White Walkers. It introduces you to that threat, and then they go like, right, here's the people, and they're all squabbling, but they're fighting over a throne, but the throne isn't going to matter eventually. It's going to be humans versus zombies, and that I really liked. And I thought that was a really good way to set up that book and to tell you that, the world isn't all everything. It isn't just a normal human world, that there is magical stuff going on. And I really liked that in Game of Thrones. And I felt like maybe that's what we could have used here. Maybe it could have been made more clear that the Shankar were not human. Maybe I did not maybe I didn't get it, but Abercrombie made it clear and I didn't get it. I didn't read it. Not like skim read it or anything, but I did start this book when I was recovering from the flu. So that could be it. But I don't think that it is. So I felt like with this, that's what I felt like we could have done with. Like we could have done with opening the book with the there is some serious shit going on, and then we get down into the personal stories, and then the personal stories slowly weave in together, and then they show us actually also these personal stories, these people are involved in the deep shit. They're involved in the stuff that's going real wrong, which is going to eventually end up being, the main thrust of the story. And we got a lot of really interesting stuff, which towards that, that last 30% of the book, which does do all of that. But I would have liked to have had that scene setting, prologue or first chapter that let us know that there was bad shit coming. Do you know what I mean? And I think that's probably why I think I will settle on 4 out of 5 for this book. And I think that, as I was saying, that establishing, I'm not a published author. I'm not a, lauded, beloved Joe Abercrombie. He is one of the number one authors in the grimdark genre. And I'm not Joe Abercrombie. I'm not trying to say that I'm a better writer. But for me, I think I would have liked a bit more establishing of the overarching story right at the beginning, and then we could have delved down into those personal stories. I still love this book, and one of the things I want to talk about here as well is not just that I love the characters and the world building. The world building was fantastic. We'll get onto that in a little second. But I want to talk a little bit about the prose. So one of the big things that I am always a champion of, and I'm talking a lot about in my reviews, is accessibility. So I love books that are breezy reads, that are easy reads, that are fast and fun, and they don't get too bogged down in this purple prose. I mean, there is absolutely a place for purple prose. There's a place for complicated wordplay. But one of the things that I love the most about this book is how easy and fun it was to read. I've often talked about how my reading time is actually quite limited. So I will often have maybe 1 or 2 hours after the kids go to bed. And at the end of that 2 hour 2 hour window, I will start to get tired and sleepy. And when I'm sleepy, I end up reading, the same page 6 times. And I end up not taking it in. But that didn't happen with The Blade itself. What was so good about this book is that it was so accessible. It was such an easy breezy, fun read. That I often found myself reading much longer in much longer stretches. I was reading later, and I actually smashed through this book quite quickly. So I can't remember when I finished my last book, but I feel like it's only been 3 or 4 days of reading to read The Blade itself, and it's a 500 plus page book, and yeah, just really loved this one. Okay, see you, bud. So the prose was fantastic, really accessible, but it's also really well written. So all 3 characters, the 3 major POVs and the others as well, but the 3 major POVs really have their own strong individual voices. I just had a great time reading this. World building is something I said I would come back to, and let's talk about that now. So one of the things that I loved about this book was the mystery of it. So nothing is truly like in depth explained. One of the things that Brandon Sanderson does is he will be like, here's a concept, and then usually by the end of the book he's fully explained that concept. He's been like, okay, so if you intake metals, then you can use allomancy. These metals do this, these metals do that. Whereas Joe Abercrombie is using this much softer kind of world building, softer magic system, where he's very much going like, well, this guy's magic and he likes fire, so he can set stuff on fire. And that's kind of the limit of where the explanation is for magic. And there's a lot more mystery to this world. It reminds me of how magic is used in things like the Adan trilogy, where, you know, there is this kind of idea of these songs, and the songs can, you know, help manipulate and control the environment around you. And then we also have in First Law, we have this idea of like magic being touching the other side, touching, you know, another realm, and kind of pulling energy through. And I just love the way that magic is described, and magic is used so sparingly. There are multiple times where using magic would make things much easier for the characters, but they don't do it because, you know, magic is, it has a cost, it's difficult, it is touching this other side that, you know, you don't want to touch if you can help it. I had so much fun with the world here. I love the kind of the different places we've had these little views of. So of the north, run by Bethod, of the south and the old empire, and kind of the different ways in which all of these societies work and are run. So like we've got Bethod, who's kind of pulled together all these disparate villages and towns and countries in the north to make one cohesive place and put himself on the throne of it. And then we have this old empire, which is, you know, tons of warring states that are kind of backstabbing each other, that has recently been overthrown by the younger son of the previous emperor. And we also see all of these other kind of magical things as well with the magic world building. We see Baez and his kind of like monastery town where he lives. We see the Eaters. We see other magi. And there's just a lot to love in the world building in this book. If you like subtle world building, which gives you a really strong sense of mystery, and to not have everything explained to you, then I would really highly recommend this. This is one of the best kind of examples of that kind of soft and subtle magic and world building that I've read. So, would I recommend that you read this book? Absolutely. As I've discussed multiple times through this video, I loved reading this. I will definitely be continuing on. I'm not going to continue on straight away because I do need to get back to Wheel of Time and make sure that I read at least one Wheel of Time book in January. And, you know, halfway through the month almost now. So I do need to make sure that I get that book read. And I will be reading some other stuff this month just to kind of vary up the genres and types of reading that I'm reading. Books that I'm reading, but I will definitely be continuing on with the First Law, and I would love to get the First Law trilogy nailed down and read within the first, I don't know, half of this year, especially because one of the big things that I'm doing with my 2025 goals is that I want to be finishing more things and not starting more things, because last year I started like 15 series, but in many of them, I read like 1 or 2 books. So definitely going to be finishing more. And although I have started this as a new series, my goal is to finish it fairly quickly. So if you are interested in seeing me cover and discuss more First Law stuff, then please do keep an eye on the channel. Let me know down below if you like this video by giving it a like. Drop a comment, let me know what you thought of this book, whether you like it, whether you love it, whether it's your favourite in the trilogy or least favourite in the trilogy. And finally, subscribe to make sure that you catch up with me and follow along as I read through this fantastic grimdark series. Hope you've enjoyed this video, and I will speak to you on Wednesday.